delighted to be joined by Lynn Pilkington, who will guide us through an important conversation ahead of World Mental Health Day on how we talk about mental health in the workplace. So Lynn, I hope we'll share some practical ways to listen with empathy, set healthy boundaries and support each other without burning out. There will be an opportunity for questions. If you can just put your questions in the chat, we will get to them at the end. And if you can put your mics off, please, everyone, and I will hand over to you, Lynn.
Thank you so much. I just got a wee thing that said recording stopped. Are we doing our recording okay? Hopefully that's fine.
The recording started again, so sorry, there was a wee technical glitch in
Perfect.
behind, but that's just
all.
to let everybody know we're now recording this session.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Karen. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, ahead of World Mental Health Day, it's coming up soon. Let me just share my screen and right. Can I check? I'm hoping you can see my slides now, but I can't tell because there's a yes. Thank you so much. Slides, perfect. Thank you. And like Karen said, welcome to the next 30 minutes with me. Going over no small talk required, how to have real conversations about mental health. Thank you for being here. Today's session, it's all going to be about meaningful conversations about mental health in the workplace. We're covering why it matters, what it takes to create safe spaces, the role of listening and boundaries, the importance of policies and procedures, and how to look after yourself. I'm going to share some resources at the end as well, and we'll have some links as well that you can take back to your teams. And particularly this topic around, especially if you're working in tech, can be quite high-paced. And I think sometimes we forget that talking about mental health is a skill that can be learned in the workplace. And it's something which I've kind of trained in for quite some time. And it's great to see people that really come on and thrive in something that they're quite scared of. But once they learn the skills and they have the skills, you really see the change in them and in the workplaces that they're a part of. So I've mentioned that there's a wee of what we're going to get up to. There's our agenda. Well, why do we want people to open up? How do we create those safe spaces? What resources can we use? And wrapping up and next steps. So a bit about me, first of all, I'm Lynn. Karen just introduced me, thank you so much. I'm a consultant. I've worked in-house on a CivTech challenge for 2 years. And that really gave me insight into working on a tech product, working in a sort of startup environment, and working with tech teams themselves, and also doing different various consulting and training projects. And I saw that, working on large-scale national projects around mental health, well-being and inclusion, those skills weren't just learned by the tech teams as well that I worked with. And I love to do that, to bring human skills, tech skills, looking after people in our tech workforce. It's so important for the future, and especially women in representation and other minority groups. So I do mental health first aid, I do psychological safety, and there's a few things about the certificates I have, all looking very fancy and official, and a public appointment as well as the Scottish Government. All of it's around making it more human, workplace more safe, and more innovative. And I think that's something which I want to stress at the very start, is that by focusing on inclusion and well-being, it's not because this is a nice to have rainbows and butterflies sort of topic. And I've mentioned it in the title, no small talk required. We're not here to train people to become all fluffy. It's about asking people real questions and keeping them safe, and also putting in place the support that helps them thrive and be more productive. So let's start with the context. Why do we want people to open up? And why does it matter? Well, I think during the pandemic, a lot more people did start to open up about their mental health. I'm someone who's worked in mental health previously. I worked at CME, Scotland's national programme to end mental health stigma and discrimination, and went into the pandemic managing 60 volunteers with lived experience of mental health problems. And I was also training to be a therapist at the time. So when people started talking about mental health and were like, oh, how do we talk about this? My team's not doing so well. There's this collective trauma. I was like, oh, I've always trained people around this. I've been doing mental health first aid for 10 years. Like, it's important to talk about things. The stigma's there, and hopefully the stigma is going down. There are kind of annual campaigns like Time to Talk Day, which is helping with that. But my friends often say like it should be Time to Listen Day, because if people are more and more opening up, do we know how to listen to what they're telling us? So when people can't feel they can talk about their mental health, the consequences are huge. You can see there on the right about the economic impact. Poor mental health costing the UK economy for £102 billion in 2023. Absenteeism and presenteeism. Around 1 in 10 adults in the UK took time off due to mental health issues in the past year, with 45% of those absences lasting a month or more. Really interesting, lots of long-term absence there. And I think if we knew how to better talk about mental health, how to better support mental health, we might look at more people returning to work sooner, quicker, looking at flexible different things that they could stay. And a lot of people, if they felt confident about it, would love to do that if they could get their staff back sooner or they could return sooner. So how do we create that environment where that's possible? And declining wellbeing and turnover, 59% of workers without flexible options said they plan to leave their role. So really we're looking at retention, which we know in the tech workforce especially is such a crucial issue, attracting top talent and keeping them. And by people opening up, you can see there on the left, avoiding burnout mistakes or leaving their roles. Workplaces are not just healthier, but more effective, and it enables people to perform at their best. Like I mentioned, this is not about just going easy on people, it's about supporting people to do their best by supporting them and really making the most of the human skills and talent that you've got. Why do we not open up about mental health? Why are people resistant about doing it? So here's some common concerns, which does come up quite often when I do things. I thought I'd summarise this just to tackle this and see how we'll address it. A lot of people are worried they see the wrong thing. If somebody does open up to them, or if they bring up a subject they're not too confident about, they've got the fear of making the situation worse or not knowing what the perfect thing to say is. And the solution, which we'll go over, is focusing on listening without judgment. Listening, naming emotions, all those verbal and non-verbal skills. And using open questions and reflective listening, like, how are you feeling? Or it sounds like XYZ. Again, these are skills which we can learn, and it shows that there doesn't have to be a perfect thing, a perfect right answer to these sorts of conversations. Some people are concerned about crossing professional or personal boundaries, fear around how much to get involved, expectations of them. And we'll go over the boundaries, how it's so important to stick to boundaries around this and follow policies and procedures, definitely. And also in connection to emotional impact and burnout, if you're having distressing conversations with people, it can be draining. And we'll look at self-care and making sure that we have debrief opportunities. By telling people to open up about mental health, we have to do that hand in hand with setting the boundaries to enable people to listen and support these people. So yeah, it doesn't stop with just opening up about mental health, encouraging people to talk. It's about having in place these supports to make sure it feels safe and there's trust to do so. And that's summed up on the slide here. There's me chatting with one of them, an EdTech product, a startup I was working with at ScotlandIS. Safe spaces don't just happen. Here I put a little formula together. There's different building blocks for to create that. Lots of people say different sort of building blocks. But for me, it's about listening skills plus boundaries, plus the policies you have, and plus the ability to take care of yourself. And that last one is so essential because self-care is, if you can't pour from an empty cup and all that cliched stuff, definitely looking after yourself first. That creates the trust and the safety and the safe conversations that's actively created. So when people know that they open up, it's going to be handled properly. It's going to be, people are going to know how to respond. If people are struggling and they do want to open up, often they don't do it because they have the kind of fear that of what people will say or not say. So that safe space is so crucial for people opening up confidently. So let's look at that. What then does that safe culture to talk about these topics? What's it built? What can we do and learn about to create that? So let's start with a quote from Stephen R. Covey. He's the American educator and businessman. His most popular book, that was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He said, most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. So true. How often are we having the conversation in our head, adding something on, or thinking about what we're going to say next? Listening, and when people open up about mental health, responding with listening, is all about an act of human kindness. We're shifting that attention from what that person is, what you're going to be saying in response to what that person is saying. You don't have to be a therapist for this. You just need to show acceptance and express genuine concern for that person. It involves listening without evaluating that person or criticizing that person and focusing on understanding that speaker's perspective. We use those active listening skills and express the genuine concern for them. It's not about getting it right. So it's making sure you understand what's being said. So saying things like, it sounds as if you feel X, or that sounds hard, or nodding along empathetically and resisting that urge to analyse or fix the problem. And putting aside your own feelings temporarily, we're not saying that you have to be totally detached if someone's opening up to you. That will impact on you emotionally, but you're not letting that impact on you being there for them, listening to them, reflecting it back to them, and really hearing what they're saying. So listening to understand how we do that with our verbal skills, ask questions to clarify meaning. When you say XYZ, do you mean? We're listening to those words and observing the body language. We're summarising what the person has said, and we're checking out the feelings that are being expressed. I do lots of this in the mental health first aid courses I run, where people, yes, it's wild to me that I spend so much just reflecting back what that person is really saying. And you often get people saying, but what about this? But I want to advise that person what's going to happen now. To which I say that's a you problem. You aren't there to fix that. That's often somebody just wants to be, unless you're asked for advice, often that person just wants that reflected back to them and to be held space for. And the verbal skills about how we're going to do that, everybody is different. That might look different for you. We've got that open body position. You might be sitting down, you might be moving. It's a really good one when you're talking about mental health. Go out for a walk, get transport together, doing that side by side. We're being attentive and we're not invading personal space. Yeah, these listening skills, we could do lots more about that just now, but that's just a few high level kind of key points about what that looks like and sounds like. And then to think about where we're having these conversations. When are we having these conversations and where? It is good to look for an appropriate space and time to talk about mental health, but these conversations can and they should happen anywhere. So that could be in the corridor, at a party. If that person feels comfortable opening up, you might be guided by having that conversation there and then. If it does seem urgent, that might be advisable. But if it isn't urgent, then you might want to go somewhere private, comfortable, relaxed. But then also you should be communicating regularly with your employees. If you're checking in regularly, then it won't come out of nowhere as a surprise that someone might be struggling, or doing wellbeing check-ins more often to hear where everyone is at wider. Just knowing where your team's at, making that a regular occurrence rather than waiting, holding this all up and then asking someone, actually, how are you doing? Having those little check-in points and knowing that you're a safe person to come to and open up to is so important. And a way you might want to do that, and a way to normalise that conversation, might be about those notable dates throughout the calendar year. I've noted a few down here: Time to Talk Day, Stress Awareness Month, Mental Health Awareness Week, World Suicide Prevention Day, and then coming up as well, World Mental Health Day. These are nice things that you might want to just mark. It gives an excuse to talk about this, give a conscious effort over to opening up and getting that conversation started. Now, so that's listening and where we're having these conversations. But the other crucial component is boundaries and your duty of care. Boundaries are there to protect both that helper and the person being supported. So by having these boundaries, we know we're ensuring that we stay within the limits of our role, we're not creating dependency, and we're not absorbing emotional burden in unsafe ways. So your duty of care towards individuals will look different depending on your relationship with that person. Yes, so if somebody's opening up to you, that conversation and your responsibilities is a bit different between whether you're a friend, a colleague, a manager, a client. So let's have a think about what's different in each of these situations. So I've outlined a few of these boundaries in practice when I've had conversations about mental health with different roles and different duties of care. The first one, when I used to be a Citizens Advice Bureau advisor, I had a high duty of care towards my clients, and they would be opening up about quite distressing situations. They might be in touch with mental health services. My escalation route there and my boundaries there would be around, is this person at risk to themselves or other people? If yes, then I'd be looking at my safeguarding procedure and escalating that around speaking to my line manager, getting in touch with people that they're already seeing as part of their mental health treatment. As a volunteer manager, I mentioned I managed volunteers with lived experience of mental health problems. Again, my duty of care was very high to these individuals. So what that looked like was making sure that if anyone ever mentioned they were struggling, did they have a safe plan? How are they going to keep themselves well? I'd speak to my line manager about making sure I took the right course of action. I'd be following our safeguarding procedure and policy. And we'll go into that in a couple of slides around the policies to support these conversations. And I might be looking at their emergency contacts and passing them on. So that was something which would be very kind of high level. I'd have a safeguarding procedure. I'd be recording my actions in a confidential, safe space and making sure that person was safe. That's a very different relationship then to look at from a stranger. So if you're a stranger, you're coming into someone, they might be opening up about distress and you're responding to that. That would be situational. That might be that you're just keeping that person safe for now. Trainee therapist. Again, when I'm a trainee therapist, my duty of care is very high towards that client. They'll be talking about being upset. That's where I'd be guided by my clinical supervisor, my ethical guidance. And all of that's very different to a friend. That if I'm a friend, have a personal relationship with someone, then I might be wanting to text them to see how they are. I might be going with them to a GP. I might be going on walks with them and encouraging them. That relationship, that I might be going around to their house, I might be inviting them to stay with me. That relationship is very different to each of those above when I'm in a more formal role or a stranger with someone. So I'm outlining that so you have a wee think about what your role is to someone and the duty of care that you incur with that. And that's there, the various responses to mental health conversations. I've noted here on the right, non-judgmental listening's the same. We might be encouraging that individual for self-help and professional help. We might be asking directly about suicide. Again, I do training around that, around if you're sometimes when people are distressed, they're thinking about suicide. Is that something you're thinking about? We'd involve the individual in decisions if possible. And we'd have a clear discussion around confidentiality and agreed expectations. To touch on confidentiality here, usually with mental health conversations, we would be respecting confidentiality, especially in the workplace. You'd be agreeing with that individual. If you're a manager and you're having that conversation with someone, who do you want to know what? What would you tell them? And you'd really be agreeing that with the person and not breaching that confidentiality. This is not an excuse for office gossip, etc. However, if that person is at risk to themselves or someone else, then you might have to breach confidentiality. And that's linked into safeguarding procedures, which, again, I'm going to go into policies and procedures. That's something which often, if you're a small business, you might not have. If you're bigger, you might have lots of policies and procedures and HR support. But even if you're from a smaller organisation, often you can download these template policies and adapt them from a membership body or online. And really we have to think about how you're setting this out clearly to make sure you've got a safe environment to open up about mental health. And then to mention, like I mentioned there, the policy and procedure foundations. These clear written mental health and disability policies that are clear about expectations, whether that's mental health first aid, well-being, reasonable adjustments. Safeguarding procedure I mentioned there, that's about risk in individuals and vulnerable adults at risk. Policies that state clearly confidentiality, what you're going to do, what you're going to disclose, how you're going to disclose it, what's a reasonable expectation, and being clear in managing expectations around that is so important for trust. absence and return to work policies. To touch on that there as well, under the Quality Act 2010, mental health conditions might be a disability for your staff if it does have a substantial long-term impact. And under that, the legal duty is to make reasonable adjustments for that person, which could look like flexible hours or working from home. So please keep that in mind. And under an inclusive recruitment process, you aren't allowed to ask someone about their disability or health condition during recruitment, but you are open to making adjustments for those individuals to help them participate. Again, something which you can do, and I've got links to ACAS at the end, which you can refer to get more advice on that and legal advice on it. And monitoring disclosure data, are people able to talk about mental health? Are they able to share about their experiences? Are people not disclosing? What's that about? And how do we make a more supportive place? What's our level of trust in the organisation? I'm going to skip over these next 2 slides because I'm mindful of time. So I touched on those points earlier on about our Quality Act 2010, but these will be in the slides that are shared with you afterwards. And those confidentiality key points, which I mentioned there, that's there. Because I want to touch on self-care and debrief for a couple of minutes. Because supporting others can be emotionally heavy, and something which is so crucial if you're encouraging people to open up, that we have spaces to get support for ourselves, to debrief. It might be about talking to a trusted person, whether that's at work and you're doing that confidentially, anonymously. It may be creating spaces consciously to debrief. If you're encouraging your staff to talk about mental health, what supervision are you putting in place? What networks of support do they have? What peer support do they have? And doing that self-care piece around exercise, music, relaxation, because a burnt out listener is not a safe listener, and we aren't creating superhumans here. We're just looking after ourselves, recognising the impact on us, and making sure we're in the best space to help other people. That was just quick 20 minutes there. And Kat, if you could pop the links in the chat for me, that'd be amazing. So I've included some resources here which you might want to refer to in future. We've got the See Me in Work self-assessment tool, one of the things I used to work on. If you're thinking about your journey and how to take stock of where you're at with your mental health journey, have a look at the self-assessment tool, which can talk you through the different areas of mental health support in workplaces. And along with free e-learning, which you can do. There's a Let's Chat tool about managers having conversations with mental health. Again, free to access, and your ACAS, which will be familiar if you're in HR. The Mind Commitment to Mental Health at Work. Again, it's a kind of a sign-up procedure which goes through different commitments of how to create an environment that's mentally friendly for people. A wee blog from me about when I was speaking at the CIPD conference about the mental health emergency in the workplace. I've got loads of links and resources to that. And also a communication with confidence blog from me from one of the places I'm an associate consultant as well. So please do use these resources, have a think about what you might need to upskill yourselves and your staff. And then that's when I do my plug, cue that. Looking for an intervention. This is stuff which I help people with. If this content has resonated with you, or you think you might have a kind of people problem, or it might be something you want more training, advice and support around, that various things that I do. And there's a wee QR code there if you want to have a coffee with me and we can have a chat. Happy to talk about the sorts of things I help people with. Yeah, something I'm really passionate about. Please do reach out. I'd love to hear from you. And key messages then. So for today, it's over to you. Building trust and openness at work isn't just for HR. It's about all of us creating that trust and showing that and role modelling that in our behaviour. The conversations that we have don't need to be perfect. They don't need to be laden with small talk and flowery. They're just human, and whatever that looks like for you. And your policies and practice must align. We looked at the policies, but we need to see that every day and how that's lived by our leaderships and everyone else. So a question after today is, what's one thing that you're going to take from today that you're going to implement? I'd love to hear about that, and please do check out those further resources. And if anyone has any questions, I would love to take them. And thank you so much for having me. So I shall stop sharing my slides.
Thanks, Lynn. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions they'd like to either put in the chat or ask Lynn directly? I have one that I want to ask us, others are considering. So, looking at this both from an employer and an employee perspective. So as we talk about, there is less, we hope, less stigma around mental health now than there was a few years ago. But if, as an employer, you think that there's someone in your team who are struggling with their mental health for whatever reason, but you just, how do you broach that conversation? You know, how do you actually start that conversation? Because there is still some stigma around it. So people don't want to admit that they're either struggling with the pressure at work, or there's issues at home that is obviously transferring into their everyday work. You don't want to, and it's understanding that right tone as well. And I think it's all just very tricky for employers not to say the wrong thing, but also to be there to be able to support. So how do you really start? You know, how does that conversation start?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lovely one. I deal with this, quite a lot from people. They're like, well, how do you just come out the blue? I don't want someone to feel judged or inappropriate. Or this is when I'd always kind of reflect back indicators. So saying to someone, I've noticed you're finding it hard to keep your deadlines, or I've noticed you've been quite visibly upset a few times. I'm wondering what that's about. I'm here if you want to talk about it. Or it might be a case of often people don't come to you the first time you talk about mental health. So I've had situations where people have built that. It might be not the first conversation. You might bring it up and say, by the way, I'm here to listen if that's something you want to talk about. And then the next time you have a conversation in your one-to-one, you say, oh, how are you getting on with that? It seems like there's some things that you might, some things are slipping a bit, I've noticed. Talk to me about that. What's going on there? And then it might be the third time that you actually find out that there's been late nights and they're not coping and da. So I'd say it's definitely about reflecting back that objective behaviour and being curious around it and inviting curiosity, the tone of curiosity. I'm wondering if we could support you. I'm wondering if you need help. You don't need to talk to me right now if there's someone else, but I would like to hear about that because I've got a responsibility to you. And I think that's the really important thing as well, to encourage people. You always can say, I'm anxious about saying this in case it's interpreted wrongly. I really care about you and I want to ask this. And when you explain that to people, they're like, oh yeah, I can explain to them what my intent is, can't I? That's not me coming in saying, you're late, you're a mess, you did it. No, it's saying, I really care about you and I see you. I would love to be there for you. I'm here if that's something that you want to talk about. Hopefully that kind of...
Yeah, and I think, and from an employee perspective, it's that there's that element of, and we know certainly since COVID in our sector, we see lots of burnout. So it's managing, how do we take those conversations to our managers without feeling like a failure? Because I think sometimes that's the challenge as an employee. You don't want to have those conversations in case it's assumed that you're not fit for the job that you're in or have been in. So it's just understanding how you start those conversations, because I think part of that is not around the stigma around mental health. It's just getting over that hurdle of, I don't want them to think I can't do this job. I'm just having a struggle for this period of time because of something that's going on.
For sure. And I think that it's so important, like I mentioned, like it's not unprofessional to struggle sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I think that some of the most like high achieving, high performing individuals will have periods in their life where it's hard. That's okay. And yeah, that feels vulnerable if you're used to being on top of things. And often, like again, we go over resilience comes from having the hard times and getting through the hard times. All my years in working in mental health or with people who are able to talk about it, it's never been a direct reflection on their ability to do whatever job they have. They can be a really good software developer or they can be a really good communications professional. And you also, like, yes, and it might be a really hard time for you, or they might have too many deadlines, or at home it might be hard. And it's that human side of it. And again, coming back to no small talk required. It's not about being a friend or changing who you are. It's about making sure, like you say, you can have the intervention if appropriate. Only I should say, like, it won't always go well. People might not like you. I don't know if I actually ever had a really negative response, but I've been in mental health first aid situations in training when people have said, I asked my colleague and they did not want to talk about it and they didn't talk to me again. That's a risk, right? Like, somebody might not take kindly to you saying, I'm worried about you. but that's about them, not about you, right?
Yeah.
If you aren't there to be, I mean, I know certainly I'm not there to be liked if I'm in a role, an HR role, or working with people or in a team. I'm asking you because I care about you, and you might not like that right now, but I want you to know that I'm here if that does come up. So you don't have to be liked by that person, and if it does
Yeah.
have a bad reaction, that's okay. That's about them too.
Yeah, it's just letting them understand that there is someone there.
The
I feel like
intention.
I've hogged your time this
Not at
last
all.
few minutes. So does anyone else have any questions for Lynn? Kat's put the
Oh,
links and things in
yeah.
the chat so you can look back at them. This webinar will be on our YouTube channel as well. So if you want to just go back and
Perfect.
listen again, you will have access to it there. But is there any other questions
Oh,
before we
everybody's
let you
saying
go
it
and
was
carry on your
helpful.
day? Well,
That's
you've won
good,
a
isn't it?
watch. Well done.
It's all good about being helpful. Gold star for me to do. No, but yeah, definitely if anyone's got any questions, you know where I am. But hopefully that started a bit of breaking it down of how we can get conversations.
Yep. No,
Yeah, going a bit more.
definitely. Wonderful. I think Fiona may have a question. Nope, that's fine. So thank you.
Changed our
I
mind.
just saw her typing away
Thanks so
there, and I
much.
thought before I let you
Put
go.
her on the spot.
Yes. So thank
No,
you
thank you
very
so
much,
much.
Lynn, for your time today. We really do appreciate it. Thank you for those links and your guidance and your advice. As I say, this
Appreciate
will
it.
be on our YouTube channel, so go have a look at it there if you want a wee reminder, or if you want to share it with some of your colleagues so that we're
Oh, for
all
sure.
better equipped and aware on how we can support not just our teammates, but friends and family as well when it comes to mental health. So
Sure.
thank you very
Thank you so
much.
much. Thank
We
you for
will
being here,
let you go.
everyone.
Thanks again,
See you
everyone.
soon.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye now. Bye.
Bye bye.